Hi there, everybody. This is Danielle right here behind the camera, and we're interviewing Mike Peaslee again today. We're going to be talking about wasps, so feel free to chime in with your wasp questions. And also, while we're here, I wanted to put out there to everybody that if there is something like some pest or topic that you would like to have us cover or have Mike answer some questions about, just chime in and let us know what those are, and we'll take that under consideration. And also wanted to let everybody know that we'll be continuing these broadcasts every other Monday from here on out at noontime. So feel free to tune in the future and go ahead and comment with any questions, like or share this video. That would be cool too. We love hearing from you. So I'm going to start off with some questions, but again, feel free to chime in yourselves. I'm going to start, Mike, with what is the difference between wasps, hornets, yellow jackets, bees, all the different stinging insects that we hear about?
There are technically scientific differences in them, but most of them are very closely related. There are actually many different species. You have a variety of social insects. You have some that are solitary, some of the wasps that are solitary. And then bees are, closely related, but they're a little different, particularly with honeybees.
And so, what are the primary differences, though? Like, are they?
So a lot of the differences are the type of nest that they build, okay, where they build their nest, yeah, those types of differences. But a lot of similarities as far as the structure of the colonies. It's really kind of split up into two ways: the social insects and the ones that are more solitary.
So, who are the more solitary ones that we're talking about?
There are some species of ground nesting wasps that are relatively solitary, so you don't have a nest per se. You have individual cells that they live in versus having a large nest.
Okay, and so if we're talking about wasps, then can they sting multiple times? I know that's something I've heard before.
Yes. Most stinging insects are capable of stinging multiple times, except for honeybees, because honeybees, the stinger is actually barbed. So once they sting you, it actually leaves the stinger inside the part of your body where you've been stung.
Okay. Oh, we have a question. I was so engrossed here, I missed it. Don Hart would like to know, how can I tell a wasp nest from a bee's nest? Great question.
There's some difference in the color, and again, you have a paper wasp which builds an open comb nest, which probably most people are familiar with. They're relatively small. You can actually see the individual cells that they lay the eggs in. Where you have hornets and other species of wasps that have the large kind of circular type nest with a single opening that has a paper type of covering on the outside of the nest.
Okay. Well, cool. And so how long do wasps live for?
On an average, I'm hitting that microphone, I gotta be careful.
Oh, sorry about that.
I talk with my hands.
You're probably hearing it live, folks.
On an average, about 5, 6, 7 weeks, but you have to take into consideration that these colonies are continually multiplying throughout the course of the summer. So the ones that are there typically in the spring, other than the queens, really aren't living necessarily that long.
Oh,
but they're sustaining that population in that colony, providing food for the colony, providing food for the larvae. So the population builds up quite large over the course of, the warm weather.
Right. Interesting. And so, with that said, will they come back next year? How does that work?
With the exception of honeybees, at least in New England and in most parts of the United States, there's some areas where you may have some nests that actually survive through the winter in some of the very warm climates. But as a rule, most everything except the honeybees, all your typical wasp, hornets, they don't use the same nest every year. And the colony actually dies out at the end of the year, and you have an inseminated queen that finds a harborage that overwinters. So they won't technically use that. They won't use the same nest, but it's very common because that queen is probably going to find an overwintering site close to where that nest has been. So the likelihood of them coming back next year in the same general area is pretty good.
Well, I got another question from Rich Minster, and he asked, do wasps get along with honeybees? It's a good one.
I would say yes. I've never seen, and again, I don't believe that I've ever read anything that specifically addresses that question, but I have seen honeybees and wasps within the same vicinity, foraging on the same types of plants, without them being aggressive to each other.
Okay, yeah. I'm picturing these little bee wars going on, but that's not really...
No, I've never, not that I've ever seen or read anything about, no.
Yeah, interesting, cool. And so I guess, are wasps beneficial? Because that's... Everybody definitely understands that bees are beneficial. So what do wasps bring to the table?
The reality is that they're feeding on nectar from plants. They're feeding on pollen. So in that aspect, absolutely, any of these these, whether it's wasp or hornet, a bumblebee.
Sorry,
things of that nature.
Watch your hand. You're getting close.
any of those types of insects, because they are visiting plant to plant to plant.
Yeah.
They're actually pollinators. So yes, they are beneficial.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It depends on where they're located. An insect really is only a pest if it's in an area that it's not wanted in.
Right. So David Pride asks, do the wasps die once the frost happens?
Yes, except for that inseminated queen who finds a secure harborage, a lot of times inside of a building, possibly in a crack in a tree, a gap in a tree or a stone wall, or someplace where they're sheltered and protected through the winter. But the rest of the colony dies out in the fall as the weather gets cold.
So she looks for a warm place to stay.
Yes.
She knows.
Yes.
And
insects know that winter's coming.
Yeah.
Insects know that winter's coming, and the colony will start to gradually dwindle, as the weather gets colder.
Right. And so you kind of went into this a little bit, but just to recap, what do wasps eat?
They feed on wasp, hornets, all of these insects. Basically, they feed on nectar. They feed on pollen. Some feed on waste from humans because of the sugars and those types of things. That's why
seen them at picnics
before. You see them
Yeah.
at picnics. This time of year, you see them a lot around trash containers and dumpsters in grocery stores and restaurants, places like that where there's a lot of food debris. They're very attracted to because of the carbohydrates, the sugars, and all that waste that goes into the waste stream.
Right, and I would imagine there's not as many blooming flowers now, so that's probably very attractive.
That has an impact as well.
Well, that makes sense. So then, what attracts them to my home? Is it those same things, or?
That is going to make the home conducive for them. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a lot of plants around, then you're going to have more of a tendency to have these types of insects around the property, which isn't, it's a good thing, and again, it's a bad thing. It depends on where they're located. If they build a nest next door, right next to your front door of your house, that's a problem. But if it's in a tree 30 feet from the house and you don't have people out there in that area playing or anything like that, so they're not really causing a problem, the best thing to do is to just leave them alone.
And so David Pratt asks, if you're allergic to bees, are you also allergic to wasps? It's a good one too.
I'm not a doctor. I can't give medical advice, but I would say yes. You should avoid that. You should avoid any of these species.
Probably
Yes.
plan on it.
Yes, and again, if you're allergic, or somebody in the family has an allergy to them, then certainly that nest 30 feet away, 40 feet away, whatever, that I might look at and say, I'm not allergic to them, it doesn't concern me, then you probably would want to consider having that treated.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely greater concern there. And Don Hart asks, are some wasps more aggressive than others?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Cool. So which ones would you consider more aggressive?
Bald-faced hornets are quite aggressive. Some of the hornets, the wasps that nest in the ground, can be very aggressive if they're in an area where you disturb them. A lot of times those will nest underneath landscaping features, things of that nature. Yeah. And if you're out there with your lawnmower or your weed whacker and you go across the top of the crop up next to the landscaping timbers or something, you get them pretty upset, and they can become very aggressive.
Yeah. So I guess that leads us to how would modern pest help somebody get rid of them?
In most cases, what we'll do is, it depends on if you have a specific nest or multiple nests, or if you have just a lot of them around your home that are causing a problem. There are various treatments that can be used. If it's a specific nest, we usually will inject an insecticide dust right into the nest, unless you have honeybees.
Okay.
In which case, if you have honeybees, if it is at all possible, we will help you to try to find a beekeeper to relocate them.
Okay, good. So we love the bees too, right?
Yeah, and again, with all these insects, and it's true with really with anything of this nature. It's only a pest when it's in a place where it's not wanted, where it's disturbing people, where it's causing the potential for allergies or things of that nature.
Right, exactly. And so should people try to take care of this themselves? I know a lot of people have attempted to with Wasps Nests.
I would be cautious about trying to do that, because they can become, quite aggressive, particularly if you disturb that nest. If you're going to do that, you probably want to do that from a distance as best you can, and you probably want to do it in the evening when they're going to be less active.
All right. And so what can I expect after a treatment for modern pest?
If modern comes and treats your property for these stinging insects, particularly if there's that really well-established nest, you want to avoid that area for a little while. It gets them very agitated. They do become aggressive when you disturb them.
So I've got a couple more questions. First, from Don Hart, he wants to know, do wasps use the same nest every year?
No, they do not. No.
So they build a new one?
They build a new nest each year. It starts out with that inseminated queen.
Yeah.
Starts out with a very, very small nest, and you don't probably even know that it's there. Just a few cells with a few eggs that starts that colony over again.
And then Anthony Silva asks, hi Mike. Oh, maybe this is just a comment, but I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Hope all is well. Any updates on bedbugs? Are they becoming more regular, or if the populations are being reduced? So going off topic, but we can still go into that a little bit.
I think they're relatively stable. It seems to vary a little bit with seasonality, Tony, and from area to area. But as a rule, I don't see that there's a huge change in the population with bedbugs. It's pretty stable. As you know, some places just have more of a tendency to have problems with them than others.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a topic we can address further in the future.
That may be a topic that a lot of people would find interesting and have questions about.
All right. So, other than the methods that you mentioned, are there other ways besides pesticide application to manage wasps?
Not really, unfortunately. I guess we could say, tear up all your flower gardens around your house, get rid of your vegetable garden, the flowering plants that have a tendency to make them attractive, but that's really not. That's not a very realistic option. Most people, I don't think, are going to do that. So there's not a lot of other really good options.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Is there any other questions out there? If not, we're going to start to wrap things up. And I'll start with reminding everybody that we'll be broadcasting every other Monday at noon. And so in 2 weeks, you'll hear from us again. And if you wanted to throw in any topics of interest that you'd like us to cover, we're happy to hear from you. We'll continue to answer any other questions. If you want to post some more later, please comment, like, and share. And let's see, the only other thing is that if you are interested in getting help from Modern Pest Services for your wasp problems, you can definitely go online to our website, modernpest.com, and schedule a free quote online. Anything else from you, Mike?
No, I guess, if you have questions, anybody watching this after it's posted, when it's not live, if you have questions, feel free to submit your questions, and we'd be happy to help you however we can.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Signing off.